there is a lot of inherent benefit, right, in our waste streams, and really taking the opportunity to capture that, whether it's from a nutrient recovery perspective, it's from a bioenergy perspective. I think we're seeing a lot more recognition that there is value there that we need to put more investment behind.
Hey everyone, it's Bob Crossan. I'm the editorial director for Wastewater Digest. I'm joined today by Ryan Roberts. He is Executive Vice President of Water for Stantec. Ryan, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Bob. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so interviewing a bunch of folks in the water industry who are high up in their business, talking about the water market, what their expectations are for 2024. For Stantec, and from your perspective, what are those areas of the water and wastewater industry that you expect you will probably see good revenue growth for 2024?
Yeah, it's a good question, Bob, and it's actually a pretty remarkable time to be in the water industry. I've been with Stantec and in water for going on 25 years,
Hmm.
and never seen anything like this before. Just kind of a record level of activity, growth, opportunity, and it's really the result of a convergence of just multiple tailwinds.
Hmm.
We're seeing massive drivers around climate change and resiliency needs in that space. At the same time, we're seeing major impacts due to water scarcity. We've got new regulatory drivers in play, a drive around recognition around resource recovery benefits and a circular economy. We've got major population shifts happening through different parts of not just the country, but globally, and that's driving need for new water supplies. And on top of all that, we got a big industrial boom happening
Hmm.
with an energy transition, right, and the water needs in that space. And then we got a lot of reshoring of manufacturing happening, which in itself has a major water component to it. So, these drivers really vary by region. It's not to say that every location is seeing all of those drivers, but they're seeing multiple of those kind of in
Hmm.
whatever region that we work in, where we operate in. And so, honestly, any one of these in itself can make for a pretty good business and a lot to do out there. But having all of these happening at once is just creating an immense opportunity. There's a challenge to that as well, but I think it's one that we've demonstrated, especially over the last couple of years,
Hmm.
that we're able to tackle and we're able to support those needs. So it's a really exciting time.
Yeah. Well, you did mention tailwinds here, I presume, and then you said challenges as well. So it sounds like there are some headwinds. What do you consider to be some of the headwinds that you might run into in the water and wastewater businesses here?
Yeah, I think we probably see a little bit of a slowing than we've seen over the last couple of years in particular.
Hmm.
That said, I expect that we'd still see the water industry to definitely outpace GDP,
Okay.
maybe by a factor of two. But even at that is, I think, still quite a bit back from what we saw here in 2023 and even 2022. And
Hmm.
I think probably the largest, though there could be some impact, I should say, by a change in administration in the US.
Hmm.
But a lot of the funding related to that work, first off, we've only seen about 25% or maybe 30% of IIJA funding really come to market.
Hmm.
These programs are really long in nature, so I think even a change in that regard, if there was to be an impact, it's not something that we would expect to see over the next year or even two. I think probably the largest headwind that we have is really about resource availability.
Hmm.
And I say resource in multiple aspects. It's not just about people. People is a big part of it. It's all parts of the life cycle. So
Hmm.
right away, starting from an owner's perspective, right, and their resourcing capacity to be able to, plan and put out and procure, right, type projects. Then obviously on the planning and design and engineering front, right through construction, supply chain is a major hurdle right now. So I think what we're going to see from that front is a bit of a right sizing, I think, in the market. There's so many drivers, so much work that was intended to be done and trying to be done, that there's a constraint on the capacity to be able to deliver all that at once.
Hmm.
So I think what we'll probably see here over the next kind of few years is really a right sizing, and I mean that in a sense of the cost of projects are increasing because of these resource constraints. Some projects are going to find that they now fall outside of an affordability limit. or maybe you'll fall outside of a business case, right? And so
Mhm.
with maybe like a more of a stretch out in the kind of timeline across some of the needs of these projects, if we may see some of that pricing start to right size, get
Mhm.
us into the right range for affordability.
Mhm.
Um, and this is where I'm going to do a little bit of a plug on Stantec, okay? Because like this is an area that we can greatly help in.
Mhm.
First off, we're set up because we are not purely a design firm. We do everything from like program management through planning, through strategic development, right? As well as design and construction support and such, but also in terms of like technology provisions, right? And advisory services. And so really where there's resource constraints at different points in the value chain, there's an opportunity that we try to bring in to our partners, to our clients, to our communities, that we may be able to provide a resource support, right, to support these projects at whatever stage that they're seeing a potential barrier to.
Mhm.
Another area is that, so Stantec's roughly 30,000 people, where we're like 400 locations across 5 major businesses. Water's one of those 5, and it's a little over 20% of the company. So we're about 5,500 people globally. The way we purposely set up Stantec on our collaborative delivery approach is really looking at how we really resource share between those different business lines. So they're not set
Mhm.
up as these like hard and fast silos. And so I say that in the example, like last year, the amount of resources that we were able to bring into water specific projects from all different business lines, all different global geographies across Stantec to wherever that project need was pretty remarkable. And it's why we were able to like fulfill our commitments and like
Mhm.
support our clients through all the work that was done last year, is really being able to leverage like that delivery model across business line. So, and I know other companies out there, I know have their own approaches to be able to support that, but in a state that we are in right now, where water is so busy and there's so much going
Mhm.
on, the ability of the whole market to be able to bring resources to bear that may have previously supported energy type projects, right? Or
Mhm.
transportation type or buildings types projects, right? To be able to leverage those so that we can better bring a higher resource capacity in this industry is a huge value add.
Yeah. Well, one thing I did want to know a little bit more about, I mean, obviously your company is very large. You have a lot of different locations. It sounds like you have a global presence as well. Could you, from a trend standpoint, both nationally and globally for that matter, what are some things that you think are going to be driving the market in 2024? You mentioned climate change, for example, at the outset. I imagine that's going to be one of your answers, but
Yeah.
are there other things like that that you're expecting will be driving some business in this year?
Yeah, and I can start there. Climate change is, of course, a massive one, right? The severity, the frequency of major climate related events is just ever increasing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's creating obviously a massive need, and that's one that we can't shy away from. It's not one where it's like, oh, a change in administrations means that we can ignore this, right? And so that's one where, right now there's a big focus on like short-term system hardening, right? Where we can come into systems, but we really need to be looking long-term at like adaptation to really protect ourselves from like new vulnerabilities. And this includes maybe more on the planning side, like nature-based solutions. It's not all about hard infrastructure. So I think that
Mm-hmm.
is going to be a massive trend that we're going to see for many, many years. Water scarcity is another one. We're seeing like major drivers and needs in this space, particularly in areas like the Southwest and the US, right? Places like Australia. But this is an emerging trend that's popping up in areas that hadn't realized it before.
Mm-hmm.
Parts of the UK, right, as an example. And so this is one where we're starting to see a shift in this globally. And our ability to be able to leverage like learnings and regulatory approach and adaptation within a community and acceptance, right, for these types of new methods of like water supply via alternative means, whether it's indirect, potable, right, or direct potable reuse, advanced water treatment. These ones that, there's a lot of learnings out there that we can leverage globally to really be able to provide adaptation in that space.
Mm-hmm.
Circular economy is another one, and
Yeah.
that's really around the recognition, right, that like our waste streams are not just waste, and we just
Mm-hmm.
don't need to treat to like a minimum viable level for discharge, but that there is a lot of inherent benefit, right, in our waste streams, and really taking the opportunity to capture that, whether it's from a nutrient recovery perspective, it's from a bioenergy perspective. I think we're seeing a lot more recognition that there is value there that we need to put more investment behind.
Hmm.
Uh, Emerging technology is another one. And I say this from a few different angles. One is like faster, better, cheaper, right?
Yeah.
And with the resource constraint that there are, ways that we can adapt technology in a way to be able to offset that is a massive need, and it's really being accelerated right now because of that need in the art industry. And so this may be through technology that we can use in the delivery of our projects so that we can accelerate how that's being delivered. But another big area is where we're able to bring in technology to benefit from us from a operational standpoint, whether it be life cycle costs, energy savings, if this is improvements in how we're able to do predictive modeling, right, around our assets. Stantec has a proprietary like flood predictor software as an example,
Hmm.
that we've developed, and this is really to help us go into communities and help them better define like where we can anticipate there being flooding issues that come about and really assist us in the preventative planning, right, for assets that we develop in that space. So those are just a few of them maybe to touch on. I don't know if there's any of those that you want to kind of dig into more detail on.
Yeah. Well, it is so interesting. The circular economy one I feel like is gaining so much traction right now. I feel like that's not just a water thing. I'm hearing that from other editors within our company within Endeavor Business Media as well, across all these other markets where they do have waste streams, say like food processing has a waste stream, and like what are they trying to do there too? And I just feel like I'm continuing to hear circular economy. I swear I even read a press release from the administration the other day on the importance of this moving forward too. So it's not just a it's not just a water sector thing. It's not just specific to wastewater. It seems like this is a very big overarching goal that's starting to really permeate further down into every market that exists.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to see that. I think because it is a extremely important topic. I think it's an extremely important benefit to our
Hmm.
communities, to the world.
Yeah.
And I think part of the delay and I think really uptick in this area is that you need to make a business case, right, for doing something that may benefit, right, a user in the future. And it
Hmm.
wasn't necessarily a direct driver as a result of like growth, right, or regulatory or like asset replacement. And a lot of times those take precedence over where infrastructure funding goes, right? So I think
Hmm.
we're really starting to see more of like a recognition for like a TOTEX type of approach of like understanding our assets and from a like life cycle cost benefit to an entire utility or entire community, right? Which is great.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about some big ideas here. I wanted to kind of narrow our scope a little bit
Yeah.
more. We're going to talk a little bit about regulations. What are some of the regulations that you're seeing are influencing the wastewater business divisions that you have got? And how are you positioned to assist your clients in that regard? I know there's a lot of things that are kind of still in the balance. You have the MCL, for example, still not fully out yet. The LCRI was the comments recently everyone put in for. You also still have upcoming future things regarding PFAS and biosolids and the risk assessments involved. So there's a lot of things that feel like they're hanging in the balance, and it's a hurry up and wait scenario right now. But thoughts from my consideration is, what are thoughts that you're having as you're waiting for these final things to come down the pike and maybe answer some of the questions to make some of these pipelines start moving a little bit faster in the construction world?
Yeah. Well, you touched on, I think, key ones right there, Bob, right? Like what we're
Hmm.
seeing, solid based nutrient limits for disposal, right? Driving new approaches in terms of how we're handling biosolids. That is happening globally, right? Again,
Hmm.
maybe slightly different emerging drivers from an urgency standpoint, depending on like which region that you're in. But that's a big one, and I expect that over the next decade, that may be the biggest one that we're going to see driving need in our industry. Obviously a lot on LCR, right, in terms of how this has come out. That is going to be very much more specific to certain communities that have those longer standing assets in place. And then PFAS. And like we've been seeing from a more progressive standpoint, quite a bit of activity in the space over the last, I'd say like year and a half. Okay. Like even ahead of like certain regulations coming into place. And so that is definitely one that's like very, very top of mind right now. And like increasing activity almost like on a week by week basis in terms of, new facilities that are looking to, really go about putting that infrastructure in place for a protection standpoint in that regard. And it's not just on the water space, right? Like
Hmm.
PFAS is also one that we're seeing activity starting to come up in the manufacturing space. I think that is one that we're also going to see, dovetail in onto the biosolid side.
Hmm.
Um, this is one where I'm going to plug Stantec again. Um, apologies. But
No, no problem at all.
we have a Stantec Institute in place, and this is really focused on applied science and research, technology, and policy. We stood this up about 4 years ago is when it was really initiated, and then as of about 2.5 years ago is like when it really took off. And
Mhm.
we are a publicly traded company. There's a lot of benefits that come with that, and I think a lot of times there may be a perception that it does not afford us the opportunity to provide to do investment in ourselves and in our future and or in our industry. I think this is an example of it that I hope kind of like shuts that perception down, because the Institute for us this is really an area that we put investment into areas that we can support the advancement of our industry just in general. This is
Mhm.
identifying new approaches to solutions that we then publish, right? It's shared information, and if that helps all of us get better, that's our mission.
Mhm.
The reason I'm mentioning it here is because as of like 3.5 or 4 years ago, one of the areas that group really started to embark on was PFAS treatment,
Mhm.
and really partnering with some more progressive, clients that, were really looking to get ahead of this and wanted to work collaboratively together on how we could do, advancements of technology, piloting of different approaches, really identifying like different ways from a cost optimized standpoint to be able to implement solutions in this space. And I think because of the work that was done there over the last number of years, it's helped us to really get in a position to be able to support a number of different clients in a more optimized approach for how they can deliver those solutions. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's exciting. It's a great group.
Yeah, well, PFAS is, like you said, it is kind of dominating all the headlines right now, and it's which is a good and a bad thing because there's so many other things that need to get done in this industry
Yeah,
right now. So,
yeah,
but anyway, I appreciate you taking the time and chatting with me. I feel like I learned quite a bit about Stantec, what you guys are planning, and what you guys are looking at for 2024. And I hope to do this again next year and learn a little bit more about what's going to happen even next year. So.
yeah. It'd be my pleasure, Bob. This was a lot of fun. Thanks.
Great. And for everyone who's watching, check out our video description below. We'll have some links to some other interviews very much like this, and you can learn more about how other folks in the industry are thinking about 2024.